In the endless dark of the galaxy, there were many voices, many empires, and many races. Some were quiet, hidden in their own worlds. Some were bold, spreading their flags across the stars. But among them all, there was one race that called itself the Alpha. They gave themselves this name not by accident, but by belief. To them, they were the first, the strongest, the leaders of all life in the galaxy. They thought their word was law, their rule eternal, and their power beyond question. For centuries, the Alphas had marched from one world to the next. They conquered planets with fire and steel. They erased weaker races without hesitation. To them, every other being was prey, every other civilization only a stepping stone. When they entered a system, silence followed. Entire histories disappeared under their hands. They believed it was their right. They believed no one would ever stand against them. And for a long time, they were correct. The Alphas were tall, their bodies armored by nature itself. Their voices carried weight, and their weapons could shatter moons. When they landed on a planet, armies collapsed. When they spoke, leaders begged. In every corner of the galaxy, people whispered about them with fear. They were not called Alpha only by themselves. The galaxy accepted it because no one had ever dared to challenge them. But then a small signal reached them. Their scouts moving across the spiral arm of the galaxy found something curious. It was a planet, blue and green, orbiting an ordinary star. The creatures living there were fragile. Their lives were short, their bodies soft, their weapons small. To the Alphas, it was nothing. A simple world, a weak world, a world that would be easy to burn. This planet was called Earth. When the Alphas studied humans from afar, they laughed. Humans fought each other, broke their own lands with war, and yet still claimed to be intelligent. The Alphas saw no empire, no great fleets, no weapons that could rival even the weakest Alpha ship. They saw only a fragile race standing on fragile ground, dreaming of reaching the stars. The Alphas did not feel fear. They felt amusement. Let them see true power, their leaders said. Let them kneel as all others have knelt. And so the Alpha fleets began to move. But what the Alphas did not understand was that Earth was not like the others. Humanity was not like the others. The Alphas saw weakness, but they did not see what was hidden beneath. They did not see the long history carved into human bones. They did not see the countless wars that had shaped human minds. They did not see the storms, the famines, the plagues, and the disasters that humans had survived. Humanity was small, but humanity was not weak. When the first Alpha fleet arrived near Earth, the sky changed. From the ground, humans looked up and saw shadows moving across the stars. They heard strange sounds on their radios, and they felt fear. Yet inside that fear, something else stirred. A question, silent but strong. What if we fight back? The Alphas expected surrender. They expected begging. They expected the same story they had written 1,000 times before. But instead, they saw fire in human eyes. They saw defiance in human voices. And though the Alphas did not realize it yet, their time of being Alpha had already started to end. For in every age of human history, when humanity was pushed to the edge, it did not fall. It adapted. It resisted. It endured. The Alphas had no knowledge of this. They had never faced a race like this before. The first days were filled with terror. Cities shook as Alpha warships hovered above them. Human weapons did little against the giants that had come from the stars. To the Alphas, it was entertainment. To them, it was proof once again that they were supreme. But as they pressed forward, they began to notice something strange. The humans did not break as quickly as others had. Even as buildings burned, there were voices shouting, plans being made, and weapons being built. There was no surrender. There was no silence. The Alphas did not know it then. But they had awakened something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. And as the fires of Earth rose into the night sky, the galaxy itself seemed to wait. For the first time, the question was no longer who are the Alphas. It was what are the humans? The Alphas had walked into a story they could not control, a story that would not end as all the others had. Because this time it was not the galaxy that would be erased. It was the so-called Alphas themselves. The Alpha fleet entered Earth's orbit with silence and pride. Their ships were vast, their weapons beyond imagination, and their leaders sat in tall thrones of black iron, believing this was only another hunt. To them, Earth was no more than a field of insects. Crushing humans would be simple. They sent their first message to the planet. It was not a greeting. It was not a warning. It was a declaration. We are the alphas. You will kneel. You will obey. Resist and you will be erased. On Earth, the leaders listened in disbelief. Nations that had once fought each other now sat in the same room, watching the same signal. The voice from space was cold, filled with superiority. For a moment, silence filled the chambers of power. And then came the realization: humanity was facing something far greater than itself. The alphas expected fear. They expected surrender. But what they did not see was the slow change in human eyes. Yes, there was fear. But it was not the fear of weak creatures. It was the fear of survival, the kind that ignites defiance, the kind that whispers, "We will not die quietly." The alpha fleets moved closer. Their ships stretched across the sky like dark clouds. In every city, humans looked upward with terror. Families hid, soldiers prepared, scientists worked in desperate silence. The world trembled, but it did not fall. The arrogance of the alphas was clear. They did not strike quickly. They did not unleash their full strength. Instead, they paraded above Earth as if showing their power was enough. They wanted to break humanity's spirit before breaking their bodies. But arrogance is often blindness. The humans studied the enemy. They traced the signals, examined the movements, and recorded every detail. While the alphas watched them like hunters circling prey, the prey was watching back. Every scientist, every soldier, every leader worked together. For the first time in history, humanity was united. The alphas could not understand this. They believed humans were divided, fragile, and broken. They had seen the wars, the hatred, the endless conflicts of Earth. They thought those conflicts meant weakness. But they did not realize that from war comes strategy, from suffering comes strength, and from division comes the will to stand when everything else is lost. The alpha commanders laughed at the resistance. They saw human jets flying toward their ships. They saw missiles cutting through the air. To them, these were toys. Their shields held firm, their armor did not bend. With a simple command, they destroyed entire squadrons. Cities shook under their weapons. Yet the humans did not surrender. Every strike, every failure only sharpened their resolve. A general among the alphas once said, "We will not need a week. They will kneel in days." His voice echoed across the fleet as if it were truth. But truth was not what awaited them. Down on Earth, humans began to notice patterns. The alien fleets were strong, yes, but they were not perfect. Their movements followed certain rhythms. Their weapons required cycles of energy, and their communication carried flaws. What the alphas considered unbreakable, humans began to see as cracks. The arrogance of the alphas blinded them further. They allowed humans to gather, to build, to prepare. They thought it amusing that these fragile creatures still fought. They did not know that each hour of mercy was a gift to their enemy. One alpha commander walked the halls of his flagship and spoke to his soldiers. "Do you see them? These humans cling to hope as insects cling to fire. But fire burns. Soon, they will be ash." The soldiers laughed, their confidence unshaken. But far below, in underground bunkers, human voices whispered a different message. Find their weakness. Strike where they do not expect. And so slowly a plan began to form. The alphas looked down upon Earth as if it already belonged to them. But they did not see what was rising from the ground. They did not hear the whispers of defiance. They did not feel the silent storm growing in human hearts. Every empire the alphas had destroyed had broken quickly. But this time their arrogance had led them into a different story. Humanity was not kneeling. Humanity was waiting. Humanity was preparing. The alphas believed they were gods among mortals. They had given themselves the name Alpha because they thought no one could challenge them. But they had forgotten one truth that humans had carried for centuries. The bigger the pride, the harder the fall. The fleets above Earth glowed in the night sky, symbols of power. Yet beneath them, humanity's fire was being lit. The world was no longer divided into nations, but united as one race against one enemy. The alphas did not know it, but their arrogance had already written their defeat, and as the second day of invasion dawned, Earth was no longer just prey. It was a hunter sharpening its blade in silence. The third night after the Alpha fleets arrived was darker than any before. Their ships covered the skies, vast shadows that blocked the stars. The oceans reflected their glowing engines, and the ground trembled with every shift of their war machines. Humanity felt trapped under their presence, as if the very air carried the weight of an empire older and stronger than anything Earth had ever known. The Alphas believed the game was already over. To them, Earth was broken, weak, and silent. But in the hidden places of the world, humans were moving. In mountain bunkers, generals stood over glowing maps. In deep laboratories, scientists worked without rest. In city ruins, survivors carried messages from one corner to another. Humanity was no longer thinking as nations. They were thinking as one. The first strike did not come from missiles or tanks. It came from knowledge. Human engineers had intercepted the alien signals. At first, the sounds were impossible to understand. But humans had always been builders, always been problem solvers. In hours, patterns were discovered. In days, translations began. And in less than a week, humanity began to hear the voices of their enemies. The Alphas had not imagined that humans could decode them. They spoke freely, mocking the planet below. Their commanders laughed about the insects still crawling after their cities were burned. They believed humans were deaf to their words. They were wrong, and from those careless words, humanity discovered something. The Alpha warships were powerful, but they required cycles of energy. Their shields could not stay strong forever. Every few hours they weakened for moments, invisible to the Alpha eye, but not invisible to human persistence. It was not a perfect chance. It was not enough to win a war, but it was enough for a strike. On the fourth day, while Alpha fleets circled the skies of Europe, a group of human jets rose into the night. They flew low, their engines hidden, carrying weapons that had been reforged and redesigned within hours. Each pilot knew the odds. Each pilot knew they were not expected to return. And yet each one flew without hesitation. The Alphas noticed them, of course. They laughed. A commander watching from orbit spoke to his officers. "Look at them. Still they rise, still they crawl. Do they not understand? Do they not see the end?" The ships moved to intercept, and then the first strike came. The jets fired not at the armor, not at the weapons, but at the precise point where the shield faltered. Explosions filled the night sky. For the first time, Alpha ships burned. One collapsed into the ocean, fire trailing behind it. Another twisted in the air before breaking into pieces. For a heartbeat, silence covered the earth. And then, the impossible had happened. Humans had destroyed an Alpha warship. The Alphas were stunned. In their long history, no primitive race had ever damaged their fleets. Their arrogance was shaken, their confidence cracked. In orbit, their leaders shouted orders, voices filled with confusion. On Earth, the news spread like lightning. Across every city, every shelter, every hidden base, humans heard the same words. "We struck them. We can fight back," the Alphas answered quickly. Their weapons rained down, their fury swift. The jets that had attacked were destroyed in moments, their sacrifice complete. Cities suffered again under the alien wrath, but something had changed. Fear was no longer the only fire in human hearts. Now there was defiance. In the ruins of New York, survivors raised flags over broken streets. In the mountains of Asia, engineers worked faster, creating weapons designed to strike at the shield gaps. In deserts, soldiers tested new strategies, refusing to rest. Humanity had seen the truth. The Alphas could bleed. The Alpha commanders raged. They ordered more fleets, more weapons, more destruction. Yet with every strike, humans studied them further. Every battle was not just survival. Every battle was a lesson. One Alpha general told his council, "They are stubborn creatures, but they will break." They always break. His words carried the weight of history. Yet history was about to change, because the first strike was more than a battle. It was a message. It told the galaxy that humans would not kneel. It told the Alphas that they were not untouchable. And it told humanity itself that survival was possible. The skies of Earth glowed with fire, cities burned, and millions wept. Yet beneath the ashes, the spirit of humanity grew harder, sharper, more dangerous. For the first time, the Alphas were not laughing. For the first time, they felt something they had not felt in centuries: uncertainty. And as the war continued, one truth became clear. The first strike had not ended the war. It had only begun it. The Alphas believed they had chosen their prey. But humanity was no prey. Humanity was a predator that had just learned the scent of blood. The Alpha Empire had never known fear. For thousands of years, their fleets had moved through the stars without challenge. Entire civilizations had fallen in silence before them. Yet now, for the first time, whispers of doubt began to echo inside their halls of power. The first human strike had been small, but its effect was great. One destroyed warship was not just a loss of metal and soldiers, it was a wound to their pride. The Alphas told themselves it was only luck, only chance, but deep inside they knew the truth. Humanity had discovered something no other race had ever seen: their weakness. On Earth, the fires of war still burned, but hope spread like lightning. Survivors no longer looked to the skies with only fear. They looked with determination. Every day, more hidden bases appeared. Every night, engineers and scientists built new weapons using pieces of fallen Alpha technology mixed with human invention. The Alphas could not understand it. When other species faced them, they collapsed quickly, begging for mercy. Humanity was different. The more they suffered, the stronger they became. The more they lost, the more fiercely they fought. In orbit, Alpha commanders argued with each other. Some demanded the complete burning of Earth, glassing the planet until nothing remained. Others hesitated, fearing that such destruction would waste valuable resources. Their arrogance blinded them again. They believed they still had time, that humans were only a small problem. But time was no longer theirs. The second wave of human attacks came not from jets, but from hidden missiles deep underground. They fired at the precise moments when Alpha shields weakened. Whole fleets shook as explosions tore through their armor. A dozen Alpha ships fell in a single night. This was no accident. This was strategy. Humanity was learning faster than the Alphas could imagine. In the council chambers of the Alpha Empire, leaders shouted across the Great Hall. One slammed his clawed hand against the stone table. "They are insects. They cannot destroy us," another answered coldly. "Then explain why our fleets are falling. Explain why their fire grows stronger each day." The council was divided, their arrogance crumbling under the weight of truth. Meanwhile, across Earth, unity grew. Nations that had once been enemies now fought as one. Scientists who once guarded their secrets now shared them freely. Soldiers from every land stood side by side. Humanity had become something the Alphas had never expected. A single force with a single purpose: survival. The turning point came during the Battle of the Atlantic. A vast Alpha fleet descended over the ocean, their weapons glowing with fire. They intended to crush the last human resistance in Europe, but humanity was waiting. From beneath the waves, hidden submarines rose. From the skies, human aircraft flew in formations tighter than ever before, and from the land, missiles fired in endless streams. The ocean lit up with war. For the first time, an entire Alpha fleet was destroyed. Their ships burned and fell into the sea, their soldiers drowned, their commanders silenced. The world shook with the sound of victory. Across the galaxy, other species watched in silence. They had lived in fear of the Alphas for generations. Now they saw the impossible. Humans, a young race, standing against the strongest empire and breaking it piece by piece. Whispers spread in hidden corners. Perhaps the Alphas are not eternal. Perhaps they can be defeated. The Alphas raged. Their pride could not accept this humiliation. They sent larger fleets, stronger weapons, and their greatest generals. But the pattern had already changed. Each new attack only taught humanity more. Each new strike only sharpened their skills. The Alphas had believed their name meant strength. But now the word Alpha was becoming a curse. On Earth, soldiers painted fallen Alpha symbols on their armor as marks of victory. Children in shelters whispered stories of the monsters in the sky who were no longer unbeatable. Humanity was no longer surviving. Humanity was winning. Inside the Alpha Empire, the cracks grew wider. Commanders accused each other of weakness. Leaders questioned if they should retreat. The word retreat had never been spoken in their history, yet now it spread like poison among them. One Alpha general looked at the reports of destroyed fleets and whispered, "They are not prey." The species that once called themselves Alpha were now hunted. Their fleets, once symbols of terror, became targets. Their arrogance, once their shield, became their downfall. Humanity had turned the tide, and the galaxy itself watched in awe. The fall of the Alphas was not just the collapse of an empire. It was the birth of something greater. It was the birth of humanity's place among the stars. And as the last days of the Alpha Empire drew closer, A single truth spread across the galaxy. The race that once ruled as alphas would soon be nothing but dust, erased by the very species they had once mocked. The Alpha Empire stretched across the stars for thousands of years. Their fleets had crushed countless civilizations. Their name had carried fear into every corner of the galaxy. But now that name was nothing more than an echo. The last days of the Alphas were not filled with glory. They were filled with silence, retreat, and shadows of panic. Once their fleets had darkened skies. Now their ships were hunted, burning across the void as human weapons struck with precision. Once their voices had commanded obedience. Now their messages were filled with desperation, begging their leaders for orders that never came. The humans did not stop. For every Alpha fleet that fell, humanity grew stronger. For every weapon they captured, they built something new. Their strategies evolved faster than the Alphas could imagine. Where the Alphas relied on strength alone, humans used creativity, patience, and sacrifice. In the ruins of their empire, the Alphas tried one last stand. They gathered their largest fleet at the edge of the galaxy, a swarm of black ships stretching across the stars. Their leaders declared, "Here we will crush them. Here humanity will break." But humanity did not break. The battle that followed was the greatest the galaxy had ever seen. For days the skies burned with fire, oceans boiled as ships fell into them. Mountains shook as weapons cut through the air. The sound of war carried across the stars. The Alphas fought with everything they had. Their weapons tore apart fleets. Their fire consumed worlds, but humanity endured. Again and again human ships rose where none should have remained. Again and again human soldiers fought with fury even as their comrades fell beside them. And then came the moment that ended it all. A single Alpha flagship, the largest vessel in their empire, stood at the center of the battle. It was their heart, their pride, their symbol of eternal rule. The humans targeted it with everything they had. Missiles, beams, and fire rained upon it. The ship fought back, destroying hundreds, yet the humans did not stop. Finally, the shields of the flagship collapsed. Its armor split. The ship exploded in a storm of fire so bright it was seen across half the galaxy. The Alpha Empire died in that moment. Their fleets scattered. Their soldiers surrendered. Their leaders vanished into the void. And humanity stood where no other race had stood before, victorious against the empire that once called itself Alpha. On Earth, the news spread like thunder. Crowds filled the streets, not with fear this time, but with celebration. Children who had once hidden in the dark now shouted the same words. We survived. We won. But it was not only survival. Humanity had done what no one else in the galaxy had ever dared. They had erased the Alphas. In the far corners of space, other races watched in silence. Species that had hidden for centuries now raised their heads. They spoke the same thought in whispers. If humans could destroy the Alphas, then humans are not to be underestimated. The galaxy had a new name to fear, and it was not Alpha. It was humanity. Yet humanity did not claim the title of rulers. They did not build thrones from the ashes of the Alphas. They carried a different legacy, one carved by pain, survival, and unity. They had learned that arrogance destroys empires. They had learned that unity builds strength. In the years that followed, the memory of the war remained. Songs were written of the first strike, of the battles that turned the tide, of the fall of the empire. Statues were raised not of kings, but of soldiers, pilots, and scientists who gave their lives so that the human race could stand free. And in the quiet halls of history, one truth became clear. The Alphas had called themselves supreme. They had believed no one could erase them. But it was humanity, fragile, divided, imperfect humanity, that proved stronger than pride, stronger than fear, and stronger than the empire that had ruled the stars. The galaxy would never forget the lesson. When arrogance rises, it falls. When tyranny grows, it ends. And when humans are threatened, they do not kneel. They fight. From that day forward, the title of Alpha no longer belonged to the fallen empire. It belonged to humanity. And across the stars, in the silent hearts of 1,000 worlds, one thought echoed again and again. They were considered Alpha, until humans erased them from existence.